Shove it, man!
Alright, Shove It Squad, something a bit different today. You know how wrestling is filled with conspiracy theories and unanswered questions? Well, the Hawk is bringing some of that your way today. Because today, we're going to be looking into the mysterious death of Abismo Negro. Abismo Negro was a luchador who some of you may have seen in my recent videos. He actually became quite the star in Mexico. He was just oozing charisma, and this helped him to become a main eventer for AAA. He was known for his flamethrower entrance. He eventually made his way stateside, where he wrestled some matches for the WWF and later for TNA as well. He actually became so popular down in Mexico that he regularly featured on their most popular daytime TV talk show. Of course, donned in his full wrestling gear. This guy really stood out. He was a household name down in Mexico, which is why when he died, an entire country mourned. After watching this video, I want to hear from you guys what you think actually happened here. Maybe everybody will agree with the Hawk for a change. Who knows, I've had no bricks through my window so far today. Abismo Negro had just finished up wrestling a show in Mazatlan, Sinaloa, Mexico. He was feuding with the Black Abyss. No, it's not any relation to the TNA one, although that would have been hilarious if there was a Black Abyss in the family. James Mitchell was a busy man. But no, this was something that they liked to do in Mexican Lucha Libre, where they essentially had wrestlers feud with an evil version of themselves. According to reports, nobody saw anything suspicious about Abismo Negro when he left the show in Mexico. According to Konnan, who also wrestled on the show, he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. He did admit that he warned Abismo before their match not to take any substances because he wanted to have a good match on the night. He had seen some dodgy guys hanging around the locker room talking to Abismo. But no, the match was normal, they hugged it out afterwards and everything seemed fine. But all of this was just leading up to the strange events of the 21st of March 2009 and the mysterious death of Abismo Negro. Unfortunately, Abismo was known for his drug use. In fact, over the years it was known that his usage had increased. There was a whole lot of this happening down in Mexico, but Abismo was known to be the worst user. He was so broke that it was rumoured that he would literally wrestle matches just for drugs. A luchador called Latin Lover, who sometimes shared hotels with him, described a strange night where Abismo was so out of it he was convinced that the devil was in their hotel room. It wasn't the first time Abismo had claimed to see the devil. He had become unreliable and he was missing shows. He was also unhappy in the AAA promotion and he was considering jumping to their rival CMML. The Black Abyss often filled in for Negro when he no-showed wrestling events. It had gotten that often that they had someone stand in for him. He would often refuse to get on planes, sometimes because he couldn't afford it and other times because he liked to continue partying so would take the party bus. He would ask the wrestling promoter for money so he could travel to the next show on the bus. The night of the incident, the promoter refused to give him any more money as he was afraid that it would be spent on drugs. He couldn't afford the plane so he got the bus. Was the wrestling promoter hiding anything? Is it possible that he gave Abismo some sort of substance? They were readily available in the locker rooms at the time. Regardless, Abismo did end up hopping on the bus, and this is where the confusion begins. According to the bus driver that night, Abismo was becoming increasingly agitated and panicking on the bus journey. At 1:30 AM, Abismo demanded that the bus should stop and let him out, but it was the middle of nowhere. If any of you have ever been to Mexico, it is a huge country with lots of it being barren and deserted. Nobody in their right mind would choose to hop off a bus on the middle of the highway to Guadalajara. It's essentially Mexican desert, it's not like they were in a town. You would never do this by choice. What was driving him to do this? Well, according to the bus driver, he refused to stop the bus, but Abismo threatened to beat him up if he didn't stop it. Realising that Abismo was a wrestler, he was scared, so he stopped the bus. Some reports have also suggested that Abismo was seeing the devil during the bus journey and wanted to escape from him. Others on the bus just assumed that he needed a slash, which is the only logical reason to get off the bus, but they assumed wrong. He never returned to the bus and disappeared into the night. Despite never being seen alive again, we did get to briefly hear from him again. His wife received a text from him asking for her help because he was lost by a river in the middle of nowhere. Rightfully, his wife panicked and contacted a local promoter who immediately rustled up a group of wrestlers and friends to carry out a search for Abismo. They went town to town handing out pictures, desperate to find him, and they did eventually find him, but it was too late. When Abismo Negro's body was discovered 2 days later, he was found in a Pittsburgh Steelers jacket lying face down in a thick, muddy river. Abismo Negro had passed away at the age of 37. The coroner confirmed his identity and put his cause of death down as drowning. This is where the conspiracy stuff kicks in. The cause of the drowning was blamed on an anxiety attack, which was brought on by steroid usage. It seemed a little bit lazy in the wake of the Benoit tragedy and other wrestlers who'd passed away to blame it on roid rage. There was no official autopsy report done, which would be needed in order to officially determine what actually killed him. They just went, oh, it was probably steroids. This is definitely the most suspicious thing to the Hawk. The coroner just declared that steroids caused an anxiety attack and that was it. No toxicology report, no autopsy, and the body was quickly cremated. Weird and suspicious as hell. Strangely, AAA announced that his death was a heart attack, although I guess that could have been something lost in translation. Or perhaps they were trying to hide his drug problems and mental state. The local promoter who found him also refuses to say anything else about the death of Abismo Negro, so nobody knows what actually killed him or how he ended up face down in that river. He clearly had enough sense about him during his wandering to ask his wife for help because he was lost. Or could there have possibly been other forces at play? Did someone else send the text on his phone? One of the biggest conspiracy theories is that Abismo Negro was murdered by the Mexican cartel or perhaps corrupt police. Some rumours say that when his body was found he had his arms handcuffed behind his back like somebody did it to him. Anyway, it gets weirder. At a show in Cancun, Abismo was scheduled to main event in a trios match alongside a man called Alex and X-Pac, and one of the men they would face was the Black Abyss. The wrestlers all greeted Abismo at the arena and didn't think anything of it, but it turns out they weren't greeting the real Abismo Negro. Current TNA wrestler Laredo Kid wrestled at Abismo Negro on the night with permission from AAA to do so. But this event took place during the time that Abismo was missing, but before it was public knowledge that he was missing. The promoter passed Laredo Kid off as if he was the real Abismo Negro. How did the local promoter know he wasn't going to turn up? He just so happened to have a wrestler ready to jump in and do the gimmick? Weird. The thing that's puzzling the Hawk the most is that if he was booked to wrestle on a show in Cancun where Laredo Kid ended up taking on his gimmick for the night, what was he doing on the opposite side of Mexico when he died? Approximately 38 hours away from where he needed to be. Then, 21 hours later, the story broke and the promoter was punished for lying. He was barred from putting on wrestling shows for 2 years. Fans were in uproar and there was talk of lawsuits against the scamming promoter. There was also an ugly segment on Mexican TV with lovers trying to justify sneaking into his funeral with his wife and family being there. Apparently, a bit of a ladies' man. I know that isn't related to any of the conspiracies, but I thought I'd just throw that in there. Whilst there is a lot unclear about the circumstance of his death, I'm sure that it was a horrible, lonely, gruesome death, one that makes me feel uneasy when I think about it. Imagine thinking the devil was chasing you whilst you're all alone in some random swamp. No, not a good way to go out. Based on the evidence, whilst we won't know exactly how he died, he had history as a schizophrenic drug user. It's most likely that he thought the devil was chasing him and he fell down a bank and was unable to swim out again. He was honoured at the following Triple Mania event and there was tears all around the building for this much loved wrestler. The Abismo Negro gimmick was retired, but Black Abyss was not. Nowadays there's a wrestler using the name Abismo Negro Jr. Let the Hawk know. Do you think there's anything else to this story or do you think I've got it pretty much spot on? Is there some sort of cover up involved? Could it have been a cartel hit? Let the Hawk know or I'm gonna throw a fit.